Tennyson's Charge of the Light Brigade actually does a lot better if you know some of the historical context of the poem. The poem was actually written just weeks after the actual charge of the Light Brigade, and I think it's important for the reader to understand that this charge was basically a misdirected command, that there was some kind of a disconnect in communication between the chain of command as the order was passed down. And so the brigade of over 600 cavalrymen, and these would be men mounted on horseback, their main weapon would be primarily sabers, swords, and also spears. Uh, these men were ordered to charge a gun nest, and this charge would take a mile and a quarter, which on horseback I know probably seems like it would be fast. However, they were also being fired on from three different directions by guns. So these men, this group of 600, over 600 men, the Light Brigade was given this order, that it was a mistaken order, that they were to charge this post that was a gun post, and they, instead of realizing that this could not be uh, a good order to act on, that this was suicide, uh, you know, um, instead of refusing the deadly order, they embraced it and they carried out the order. And the poem we have here depicts quite gloriously that this last charge, the suicidal charge, but it's a charge that the men embrace and they ride bravely towards their death. Maybe not bravery, because bravery is action with absence of fear. I think more of courage. Courage is action in spite of fear. And I think that's a key difference, that these men knew what they were charging. They knew that they would probably not make it unscathed, but they acted anyway. And so I guess that would fit much more of courage. Just to give you some of the figures of the aftermath of this charge, there were 110 soldiers killed and 160 soldiers were wounded. So if you do the numbers, that's almost half. I think there were actually 670 something, but if you take the 600 and do the math, almost half of them were either killed or wounded. The horses actually fared much worse. There were 375 horses that were killed, and they have some survivor accounts of this charge, and the survivors describe it was a terribly bloody charge. That there was, that these soldiers would see the shot fire just take off limbs of the people riding beside them, their fellow soldiers. They would just see them get massacred, and they'd have to keep running. They'd have to keep charging. The most terrible thing, I think, is that when they got there, they declared retreat. And so they crossed a mile and a quarter. When the retreat was declared, they had to cross the other direction back. One account talked about one of the soldiers had his head carried off of his soldiers, and his body continued to ride and saddle for quite a while onward before it finally fell out. So I mean, you just got here, as far as it being a war charge, it's a terrible charge, but the way that Tennyson describes it, the terror, it transforms into something glorious. And I think this is something that the British Society was very fascinated when this was published. They were angry at some of the officer command structures of military because of this, and it just reflected, they thought, this disregard for the foot soldier, that they wouldn't take the time to communicate clearly, because they didn't really care about the lives of the actual soldiers whose feet were on the line. But it also caused this kind of fervorish embrace of the foot soldier, of the common soldier, and I think we definitely see this in the glorious presentation Tennyson's able to give these soldiers. I think it's a fascination that we still have today. I mean, I think you can find plenty of analogs we have of Tennyson's poem in our films today. I've just got a few that I thought of off the top of my head. We've got movies like The Alamo, where we've got few versus the many. There's no way that they can make it, but they try anyways. Of course, you've got 300, You've got Glory, which is a great Civil War movie, and the final charge in Glory is a charge that the men taking the hill. The soldiers know that it's going to be suicide, know that they're not going to take this hill, but they try anyways. And of course, the movie's name is Glory, to depict the glory of that moment. So, I think that this is a picture of war that's interesting because it is a bloody picture. Although Tennyson does make that blood much more muted, and the glory is much more prominent. But it's a picture of warfare that we see that it is a violent picture of warfare, yet it is a glorious picture of warfare. And this would be when you read Wilfred Owen's Dulce et decorum est. This would be an example of the old lie that he's responding to, that it is altogether fitting and beneficial to die for your country. This poem would be one of the poems that he's remarking against in his own poem that he composes from the front lines of World War One, where he feels himself as being lied to by poets from the past and how they've described the glory of warfare. So we'll get to that when we talk about, or when you read Owen's Dulce et decorum est. But for this poem, at least, you do have a soldier who rides to his doom, but he rides with his head held high.